Poney Chiang, welcome back to Geological.
Hi, Michael. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the re-invitation.
Well, in our last conversation, of course, we're going deep into deep. It's kind of funny because you go deep in the body with like scalpels and cadavers, right? But we're going deep into acupuncture points and neurology and all that. But one of the things I found like funny in the way that life is so curious is that you didn't start out as an acupuncturist. You weren't even interested in acupuncture. You were an herb geek. That was your
Absolutely.
thing.
That's right.
And so I want to know more about you and herbs and how you think about all that. And then, there's some other stuff we'll probably get into that I know you're interested in. But let's start with the herbs. How did you start to gain that interest? And tell me some about where you were doing your studies and the things that you were interested in with those.
So as I have mentioned in our first interview, I the way that I was exposed to Chinese medicine through the pop culture, Chinese pop culture, and the Chinese cinema was a depiction of a herbalist taking the pulse and herbs being dispensed and herbs being cooked, and so that was very early on, sort of my imprinting of what a Chinese medicine physician involved was being a herbalist. And then also when I was reintroduced to Chinese medicine because my mom went to consult a Chinese medicine practitioner, that practitioner happened to be an herbalist and did the pulse diagnosis. And I was very, very fascinated with the diagnostic aspect. And so when I enrolled in Chinese medicine school, I had this idea that I was going to become like a doctor, a physician. And then even though I didn't grow up taking a lot of Chinese medicine, because my grandfather was actually a Western medicine doctor, but they had their own pharmacy, and so the whole experience of being a patient involved taking something, whether it's Eastern medicine or Western medicine. So I expected a doctor to be something that gave medicine, whether it was internal or external. I didn't see a doctor as somebody who gave needles. And so when I made up my mind that I wanted to just be a physician, that's the only thing I knew. It's not that I had, it was more based out of ignorance, I would say, but not because I was actively trying to be a herbalist or something like that. And
But that's what it meant to be a doctor, was to be an herbalist.
And I have to say that ignorance came to light when I became a practitioner. I realized that, wow, to be good at acupuncture and to be good at treating pain, which acupuncture is known to be good for, and patients expect acupuncture to be able to treat pain problems, I realized I was terrible at it. Yeah. So and then I realized, oh, okay, I shouldn't just think that like herbs is better than acupuncture or something like that, because there are these sayings that it takes 30 years to be a good herbalist, but takes 3 years to be an acupuncturist. We know that to not be true. That was probably invented by a herbalist, that saying.
Sure. Well, people that practice one way, it's like, oh, this is the true way. And those idiots over there, it's not the true way, blah, 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 right?
Yeah,
it's more marketing than anything else. But, I think it is true that it does take, regardless of herbs or acupuncture, it does take a long time, though, doesn't it?
It takes time and practice and dedication to be good at anything. So I had a conversation with one of my associates just yesterday. He was interested in learning more about dry needling, as in Travail trigger point release approach to acupuncture. And I told him, if you don't really know much about it, then the average person thinks that that's just treating action points. We already know how to do that. But in my humble opinion, very few people, whether you're Eastern background or Western background, know how to treat trigger points very, very well. In other words, how to do dry needling very well. So I said, yeah, go ahead and learn it, because you'll be surprised at how much there's actually you thought you knew, but again, due to ignorance, we did it, I didn't know. Yeah. So I didn't mean to go on a segue with the acupuncture. Coming back to the herbal discussion a little bit more, I was very interested in the classical approach, and I think it had to do with my interest in metaphysics. So before I got into Chinese medicine, I was enrolled in a doctoral program at the University of Toronto, and halfway into the program, so I had reclassified from my master's degree to a doctoral program. Halfway into that program, that's when I made the conscious decision that I want to be a Chinese medicine practitioner.
What were you
So
studying prior to
I,
that?
the techniques and the approach I was using to do my basic medical research is molecular biology. Compromises your lung function, among many other membrane and tissue functions. That's actually the one that ends up killing you. Because so working with like proteins and DNA levels, and but I was applying those techniques to study a medically important. That's the bacteria that normally for most people would not be an issue, but in the cystic fibrosis patient, they have difficulty getting rid of that bacteria. And bacteria called Pseudomonas. It's an opportunistic pathogen that's
Hmm.
common in hospital what they call nosocomial settings.
And because they
So,
can't clear it, it becomes this lingering pathogen, and then you get to stagnation,
and
and
it's actually the bacteria that if you have cystic fibrosis, which
you know, on and on and on. Then you get sick. Yeah.
so I was studying that, but so halfway into my program, I made the decision I want to be a Chinese medicine practitioner. So
That's a huge shift.
yes, the big shift. Well, I was brainwashed to be a physician. Just wasn't Chinese
Ah,
medicine physician because I grew up
uh-huh.
in that family. Being from Chinese ancestry, there's that Confucianist value system of favoring the male offspring and sort of like carrying on the family name. So my family was a Western medicine family, so that was kind of like if your father was a swordsmith, then you're going to be a swordsmith. There's that kind of that family
That family
name.
lineage thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I was indoctrinated into that, and it was just that I was in that direction. And so the interest in studying the Chinese medicine was because I had this sort of fortuitous opportunity to see my mom go to a herbalist, and the pulse diagnosis that the physician was doing just fascinated me. And then um, so of course I was kind of quote unquote stuck in this doctoral program. I knew I should finish it. It was probably good for me, but there was like 2 years of suffering that I had to go through so I can actually get to where I really wanted to be. So we had this extended family friend who was a TCM practitioner. He said to me, "Well, there are some things you can do to sort of like whet your appetite, and this way was also a way for you to really make sure that's what you wanted to do for the rest of your
Yeah.
life."
Good advice.
So yeah, so he encouraged that I study shiatsu. You can do a part-time 500-hour shiatsu program after school. So I was PhD student by day and shiatsu student by night.
Uh-huh.
and
The transformation begins.
yes, and then I also enrolled in medical qigong. And then so where am I going with all this? And then thought, hey, if I want to understand more about qi, maybe I should study like feng shui or something like that. And
Mm.
it's based on yin yang, based on the five element. It's probably going to help me in Chinese medicine school. So I actually got into metaphysics quite deeply. Studied a lot of different styles of feng shui and read Chinese books on Chinese feng shui classics, and got into Chinese astrology. So by the time I finally graduated from PhD and went into study Chinese medicine, my head was already full of the notions of qi and the bagua and the eight
Right. No,
trigrams,
and the
trigram.
classic stuff as well. I mean,
Yeah,
so often I know us, us folks in the West, we will study Chinese medicine. We're learning some Chinese medicine theory. And, it's kind of mind blowing to have your mind go from linear, rational to circular. Uh, you know, uh, I mean, the causational chain is just completely turned upside down and on its head, right?
right.
And inside out. And then we hear about things like feng shui or, bots or, that kind of thing. And it's like, how do you even begin to make sense of that, right? It's like, well, maybe after 10 years of practice, I'll start to be able to consider studying it. You, on the other hand, I mean, that's where you came from. Your
Yeah,
basis in the medicine wasn't from the medicine, it was from the very deep classical material that underlies not just Chinese medicine, but Chinese philosophy, Chinese thought.
That's right.
I'm going to call it the deep structure of Chinese medicine.
I mean, some people say that, there's another saying, like they say the Yi as in medicine is the same as the Yi as in the Yi Jing change. Like all medicine is rooted in the change. And because the two characters rhyme, they're kind of homonyms.
They do rhyme. They're
Yeah,
written very differently, but to the ear, they sound very similar.
yeah. Um, um, so because of this interest in the classical and the very metaphysical things, when I went to study Chinese medicine, I guess that made me want to explore sort of the origins and the pre-TCM lineages of Chinese medicine. Just want to try to get back to the source, and so that made me interested in the classical approach of herbal medicine right off the bat. So I was very
And,
interested
and you
in.
already had that background from, watching the shows on TV and such,
That's
right?
right.
So in there, you've already, did you watch Iron Monkey? Did you ever see Iron
Yeah,
Monkey?
I've seen. Yeah, it's like those are the ones I talk about, and
So
I've.
Iron Monkey was great because I don't know if any of you have seen it. Uh, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, it's really fun because this guy's like this Robin Hood character.
That's
He's like
right.
doctor by day, steal from the rich, give to the poor at night. And he's this doctor who will like read pulses, two different patients at the same time, one on each hand, and he'll write prescriptions simultaneously, two prescriptions at once, and give it to his assistants. It's just like, I remember watching that when I was in Chinese medicine school and thinking,
Yeah,
ooh, I wonder if I'll ever get that good sometime.
yeah, but that
It's hilarious.
that movie came later, but that's exactly how I was exposed to Chinese medicine, introduced is through the pop culture. And
Right.
my notion of a Chinese medicine practitioner, was like a polymath. They were good at martial arts. They were
Exactly.
good in a lot of other things, and so that was very exciting. And in the West, we have similar things. Like Leonardo da Vinci was a bit not just was an engineer, was an anatomist, was an inventor, was a mathematician. Like in the golden ages, they were just well rounded. And
Yes, exactly. And we
yeah,
talk about this in our profession now that, you need to, cultivate yourself and cultivate your practice. And actually, I'm going to take a little side bend here. I just want to run this by you. Okay.
hmm
Because I hear you use the phrase doctor as polymath, and that just, it rings true that we're supposed to be, if we're really going to help people, we're not just, I'm using air quotes here, healers, but we are well rounded enough in ourselves that we can see possibilities in our patients that they may not be able to see.
hmm
And one of the things that I often hear acupuncturists talk about is how, I'm a healer, I'm not a business person.
hmm
And it's like they're cutting off this whole side of understanding the world of business and transaction and power and authority and all the things that go with business. And it seems to me that anytime we cut something off in ourselves, it will affect us in how we are as a practitioner. That
uh, yeah.
whatever aspect of life we're holding in resistance, it might be an obstruction that we're putting in our path to becoming a better practitioner.
I have a mentor who is a Taoist internal alchemy practitioner, and he's always told me, like, if there's something that you don't want to do, then you need to really reflect and meditate on that. Like, what is it that you're afraid of? Why is it that you don't want to do it? Because chances are this is actually the exact thing that you need to be doing. Um, so if you find yourself kind of resistant to the idea of doing business and being entrepreneurial with your practice, then you gotta ask yourself, why is that? Like, it, you know, this idea, this kind of a conflict of interest that a practitioner is supposed to be a perceived conflict of interest. A practitioner is supposed to be benevolent and give endlessly, and therefore that somehow opposes the idea that you should receive energy or consider money as a token of energy in return for that, right? But at the same time, if you don't take care of yourself, how are you going to continue to do that? And what's not to say that if you are successful in your business and if you actually have multiple locations, you actually ending up having more leverage to help even more people. So they're not mutually exclusive, but being a good businessman will actually make you able to help more people.
That makes sense to me. It's something that it's taken me a long time to come around to myself. I would agree with your Taoist mentor that the thing that you feel like is in the way or you don't want, probably the thing that needs some focus. Because, if it stays in sort of the shadow aspect of ourselves, it's like the world has access to it, except we don't have access to it. And then it just causes all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, something that you know that you say, oh, I will never do that, it's just not me or something like that, then that is really a blockage and you're not going with the flow, you're kind of going around it. But I mean, of course, it's kind of all philosophical and all a little bit metaphysical. That there's one shouldn't do something that like one be forced to do something that they absolutely have no interest in. It's probably not going to do very well. Okay, I definitely believe in being passionate and doing the things that motivate you. If you had to do something, like for example, if I had to do medical research, that I would not be happy, right? So that's
Right.
not that I wanted to do Chinese medicine. So
And you're doing medical research.
yes, that's funny thing. See, that's the thing.
You're actually doing medical research.
That's the thing. Yes. So that's another example of the irony in life is that I've gone away from it. Okay. But then it has interesting way of kind of bringing me right back. So one can't truly escape one's path, if you want to think of it that way.
I have heard the phrase, I met my fate on the path I took to avoid it. And it's true. I mean, we talk about the things that we hold away from ourselves. I am never doing this. I have no interest in that. I don't want to,
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. I never had an interest in medicine. I grew up similar to you in a way. I mean, I'm not Chinese, but I grew up Jewish. Jewish and
Hmm.
Chinese really similar. Firstborn male of my family and
Hmm.
generation. Lots of pressure to be a certain way, right? Doctor,
Hmm.
lawyer, the usual thing.
Yep.
I went like this. Medicine, no way. I want nothing to do with medicine. Not interested. And up until I ran into Chinese medicine and went, oh, what's that? Right. But, there's that funny thing again, the thing that we resist or say we don't want. We can either look into that and maybe discover something in there that we're frightened of, or maybe even really want, but we're afraid we can't quite manifest. Or we can just let life unfold itself and drag us back to it at some point in time. It's almost like we're doomed to it if we resist it.
That's right. So I got into the herbal medicine, wanting to go sort of deeper back to the more traditional aspect of it because of this metaphysical introduction I've had. So I naturally gravitated strongly towards the Shanghanlun and I've come to the realization in my schooling that even though we learned some Shanghanlun formulas, the big ones, the heavy hitters, but the Teaching approach to herbal medicine is actually a more Ming and Qing dynasty oriented. I wanted to know more. If everything came from that, Zhang Jing was the sage and the father of the herbal medicine that we know of today. I wanted to learn more about that. So I knew that when I graduated and needed to get some kind of internship experience, I wanted to in China. I wanted to be able to learn some of that. So I was already interested in the dermatology at the time. Again, because of cultural upbringing, I know that so for certain kind of problems, you're supposed to go to a Western doctor, and so certain kind of problems, you're supposed to go to the Eastern doctor. There's that separation, and
And that's very clear in places like Taiwan.
yeah, and so whether it's right or not, that was the sort of the cultural bias, and so for dermatology, it was one of those things where if you have a dermatology problem, you know, and it's a chronic one, then you need to go see a Chinese medicine practitioner. So because some of my family member have had some skin problems, and knowing that Chinese medicine is actually sort of has the reputation of being able to do things with the chronic skin issues that Western medicine might not be able to provide a satisfactory result for a lot of the patients, I wanted to study more in that area. So spent 2 months in Shanghai following chief of dermatology at the Shuguang Hospital. And then after that, I spent a month in Tokyo at the Keio University. And the Keio University has an affiliated hospital that has a TCM clinic. Not TCM, it's a Kampo medicine clinic.
Kampo medicine,
Yeah,
which is basically Shanghai formulas.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing is that they have like that Kampo clinic had like 1 day a week that treated atopic dermatitis for children. So it was perfect for me. I could satisfy my interest in delving into the Shahan and classical formulas, and at the same time see how the Japanese are treating skin problems like atopic dermatitis. And
It all really weaves together for you with that. That's, I mean, it's like perfect for what you were setting out to do.
Yeah. So I spent 3 months, 6 months after I graduated, and I went to Shanghai and Tokyo for 3 months. I was there for the entire 3 months. And I knew at the time that when I needed some sort of internship experience, it was going to be herbal medicine. I didn't even spend any time doing any acupuncture at all, because I thought maybe I would do that later if I would go back on another trip. Just, you can only learn so much with that short time that I'm there. I was just going to focus on one or two things. And at the time, my passion was in herbal medicine. So with the experience in the Campo, was very interesting for me. I love the simplicity, and I don't mean simple in a condescending way. There's an elegance and an efficiency in the simplicity of the way that they practiced Shanghai-based medicine, Zhang Zhongjing style medicine. Yet at the same time, the number of compound formulas that they have has had at least 30, 40 years of biochemical research behind it, from animals to clinical trials. So they knew exactly when they use this, which enzymes in the bodies are going to get affected, which blood markers are going to be affected when you use such and such formula. It was simultaneously almost Western medicine at the same time as traditional medicine.
Well, it sounds like almost a very binocular view. They were looking deeply at both aspects.
Yeah, so there are actually Japanese physicians that have not studied Kampo, that only practice, that at least don't identify themselves as being a Kampo practitioner, that study just Western medicine, but will use Kampo sachets in a biomedical way. Especially parents come in with kids with fever. Sometimes they'll say, I don't want to take this and that. So I would like to take some Kampo, and the doctor will know, exactly what to give this child that will have similar antifebrile effect and so on. So it's interesting that you can choose to practice Chinese medicine in a Western medicine way, or you can practice Chinese medicine, or my Chinese, I mean like Oriental medicine, in a traditional Kampo way. So then, but that clinic that I was going to in Keio University, it was a traditional Kampo clinic. So they did pulse diagnosis, they did abdominal diagnosis. And that fascinated me because I had already had this introduction to shiatsu, which has the abdominal diagnosis component. So that it kind of probably made me more fascinated. And also, we didn't really learn abdominal diagnosis in TCM. I thought that would be a nice way to add another dimension of diagnosis, and to be able to almost prescribe a herbal formula based on the abdominal conformations.
Yeah, well, so there's some books that have been written on that. There's whole ways of studying where you just check the abdomen. Oh, this is what the abdomen feels like. Here's the formula for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was fortunate that my OM 101 class teacher was Nigel Dawes in New York. And so Nigel, obviously very well known for Japanese acupuncture, shiatsu, and Kampo herbal medicine. So, here's a mentor of mine that has, invested his entire life in this approach. Naturally, I felt that it was, at least I won't be wrong in checking it out, So after that introduction, so it was interesting. We would have clinic in the daytime, in the morning, see patients, and in the afternoon, basically, I was reading the Shanghai Lun and the Jingui Yao Lue, in the traditional Chinese, and then we would discuss it, and then we would have sort of like lab meetings and case meetings. So up until then, I didn't really have the time to really sit down and just really go through the classic like that. And so I'm very thankful for the opportunity. It's like I probably would never have found the time to really, spend an entire month to just read through these classes carefully like that. And so it was in a way, in the morning I had the clinical, and the practical, and then in the afternoon I had the more theoretical, didactic type of to complement the morning, and that was
And
my
plus your self-study of the classic at that time. I mean, it's, I mean, I hear you talking about this experience, and I think, it might not be a bad idea every now and then to take a month off and just go delve deep into whatever area of focus it is that you want to go and learn more about, and just, almost like a retreat,
yeah.
just put yourself in that context and just do that. Just give yourself this opportunity to really, really dig in,
like a,
because in day-to-day life, we're usually too busy.
yeah, like a sabbatical, so like university researchers, after like 4 or 5 years, they would take a year sabbatical or a half year sabbatical and network with other researchers, but you know think about maybe a new future research directions and things like that. It's very good, very rejuvenating.
And sabbatical is not a vacation. It's not
So yeah,
time away from your inquiry. It's time going deeply into that inquiry. It's, it seems like it's a more yin aspect in some way. You're just letting yourself soak in it.
yeah.
Hmm.
Now when I came back to Toronto, I spent a good 6 months getting a clinic ready, setting it up, sourcing herbs and things like that. And when I was setting up my clinic, I definitely incorporated my feng shui experience and knowledge. I actually worked as a quote unquote professional feng shui consultant for a while. And I actually did this during the time I was a PhD student. And actually throughout the entire time that I was in the Chinese business school in New York. I even had, I guess, 5 years after I came back from New York, back to Toronto, I still had clients, feng shui clients in New York that I would every once in a while go back down to New York to offer them my services. But I would say probably 5 years into my practice, I decided, I'm gonna have to just focus on the medicine. But there's always that desire in the back of my head that maybe when I retired, I will become a feng shui consultant and pick that up again because I am really, really interested in it.
Do you use the feng shui at all in your clinical work? I mean, are there times people come in and there's something going on and you think, oh, your kitchen's in the wrong place, or, there's something in your life that is causing you this problem, and give any kind of advice to them, or use that perspective of your feng shui background to look at what's happening for them so you can figure out a way to help them? Does it show up in your clinical work at all?
Um, yes, it does. For example, there are many branches of the Chinese metaphysics, and there's a few that are more directly relevant to medical, and to medicine and healing. One thing that I use a lot is actually face reading, physiognomy, and but it was just they say that was actually traditionally a medical face reading, but then they developed it into sort of a uh, astrological or fortune telling type of face reading.
Well, I mean, you could see how those would be connected, right? If there's certain
Absolutely,
things that
yeah.
you can see on the face that are very obvious, that are going to be either challenges or benefits to somebody, and if you can see it and they can't, and they come to you at a point in life and go, I'm having these troubles, you can just like look at it and go, well, of course you're having those troubles.
Yeah,
You're supposed to be.
yeah. So I do incorporate things like that. I that just there's one time where in my office where I'm sitting right now, my office in my clinic, I have hung up on the wall not just my medical certificate diploma, I've hung up on the wall my feng shui certificate diploma as well. And I have to say I've taken it down. I've taken the metaphysics one down for now, because uh, some people may not know this, but within the Chinese culture, some people might perceive that as you're just kind of like a charlatan, that you're not a true dedicated Chinese medicine practitioner if you dabble in the metaphysics, astrology, and the feng shui. Then they might actually discredit your medical expertise if you were to dabble in those kind of esoteric arts. So I didn't want that to have a placebo effect on my patients and have them already come with some kind of a doubt or something like that. So
Mhm.
that was
I mean,
that.
everybody comes with their own preconceived notions anyway.
Yeah, but I definitely have patients that like recurring patients that I've known for years, and they talk to me about their astrological troubles. We talk about the Chinese New Year's coming up, and they say, I gotta get my house ready feng shui wise for the new year. So you're supposed to make changes to your house before the new year rolls in, not afterwards, because you don't want to be because there could be bad energy at certain sectors of the house that if you were to move it, you might actually activate that bad energy. So you need to know when that bad energy is going to come and make changes beforehand so that it's prevention, not intervention. The same thing as our medicine, right? Prevention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, because once you try to intervene when the bad energy is already there, it's always playing catch up. You never be a step ahead. Um, so I have to say I don't, incorporate the metaphysics with every single patient. That did cross my mind. It would be something that makes me a unique practitioner. But some people might be here, hey, I'm just here for needles. Just put needles in me. Then don't talk to me. I don't want to listen to any of that stuff. I don't want to assume everybody's interested in that. But if I find that they are interested in that and receptive to that, then I offer that as well. So it's not force fed upon them.
It's an offer if the situation's appropriate
Yeah.
to it. Yeah. So the face reading is, and I remember when I was in Taiwan, I got a book on face reading, and it's in my collection somewhere. Maybe I should go back to it. If someone wanted to know more about face reading, I mean, how did you learn it? Where did you get your information? Was there a teacher you had? Did you get it from books?
There
How would
are
someone go about learning some things about this?
Yeah, there are a lot of books. Fortunately, because I can read Chinese, I could buy a lot of these metaphysical books in Chinese. And but you can learn this. Like a couple of people come to mind. Lillian Bridges teaches face reading. She has books and she teaches classes on that. I've studied with a lot of different feng shui teachers, but I would say my root teacher is Joey Yap out of Malaysia. And he has courses on face reading, feng shui, astrology, all aspects of Chinese metaphysics. It's basically a Chinese metaphysics academy. It's called Mastery Academy, and it's out of Malaysia. But they have instructors that travel. He has a team of instructors that travel around the world. He comes to New York to give talks, and and these days there's online courses and things like that. So if that's something that interests you, it's very easy to find good quality courses on that. For example, with the face reading, there are different parts of the face that represent different ages. So basically, your years is the first 14 years of your life. 1 year is seven, the other year is seven. That's interesting. Remember the cycles of 7 and 8 that we learned in Chinese medicine school, right? And you have to do the Jing essence. Jing year is kidney, right? So really the Jing essence. Interesting in metaphysics that the year is like seven. The first 7 years of your life is in the year, and the next 7 years of life is also in the year. And that's like when you're 14, that's like puberty. That's when the changes happens. Very interesting, right? Like
It is,
the
yeah, when you look at
metaphysics,
it that way.
yeah, it's related to the Yi Jing. Um, so and then then the age starts from the top of your forehead and starts by the time it gets to your eyebrows, about the mid 30s. It gets to your nose to the 40s and 50s, and when it gets down to the lips, the mouth is like your 60s and 70s. So you can look at discoloration, blemishes, and things like that in those areas and have an indication, oh, what this person's health might be like in the next 10, 15 years. And so you already have sort of like a prognostic plan ahead of you if you have some notion of these kind of chi cycles or life cycles that the patient is going to be expecting in their life.
It sounds like you're talking about blemishes or things on the face. Is there a connection that you see between like dermatological issues that affect the face and the face reading aspect? Do those connect up in some way in your mind, or are they somewhat separate?
There definitely quite a number of dermatological problems around the face: rosacea, acne, seborrheic dermatitis. Um, those are the sort of more common type of dermatological problems on the face. And some of the ways that we do differential diagnosis is based on the location of the face, but of the rashes. But also, we also look at the age of the person. Like we're less likely to think that an elderly person has acne, whereas similarly, we're less likely to think a young person who has some kind of red rash on their face is going to be rosacea, because it tend to affect people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So there is an age aspect of the dermatological diagnostics as it relates to the face and age. Um, if you were to look at acne, for example, right? We sometimes do look at where the acne concentrates on the face and try to do a diagnostic from an internal Zangfu perspective.
Well, of course, and often
Yeah,
you'll see it on the Yangming channels.
exactly.
Very, very common.
So if you see it along the jawline, which think in terms of connecting stomach 4, 5, 6, and 7, like that is supposed to be a more constipation related type of acne. But of course, you would never just assume that. You confirm from the patient if they indeed have that. Then if they line up, then you might actually treat the acne by using herbs that help release heat, repletion heat from the yang ming. Whereas
Large
gynecologic,
intestine in particular.
yes, exactly. And whereas if the woman is a patient's female and they also have, they tell you that the acne is worse the week before the period, typically we expect those acne to be in the perioral region. And so if you imagine the face as a microcosm, then the mouth area would be the lower jiao. And so therefore, the gynecological reproductive organs are located in the lower jiao. They will tend to have acne in that area, in the chin and around the mouth, for example. Whereas, young people are more likely to have acne, like young as in puberty, they had in the forehead, and that would be the upper jaw. And so that would be more like lung and heart type of a microcosm, and you actually prescribe herbs that clear heat from the lungs, for example. So, if it wasn't for you asking me these, I don't I'm not even aware that I'm incorporating physiognomy and face reading in my practice, but I guess I am incorporating the metaphysics, the five element, the channel theory, the Zangfu theory, and the face reading all together when I'm diagnosing the patient.
Well, that makes sense to me. I have found that learning medicine is a lot like learning a language. And in the beginning, when learning a language, it's arduous. You've got to relabel the world with different terms. You have to learn a new grammar. And after a while, you can begin to start to think in that language. And you don't even realize that you're thinking in that language. You're just thinking in that language. I think it's true with Chinese medicine too. We learn maybe something with herbs. We learn something about a microsystem. We learn something about acupuncture. We learn something about how the 5 phases connect with the 6 Chiang. Whatever it is, there's all kinds of different ways of looking, perceiving, thinking about how we use our medicine. And then as we gain some facility with those different ways of thinking, they kind of blend into each other. And I think it pretty much goes unconscious at that point. We don't realize what we're doing. unless we're having a conversation like you and I are right now. Or I suspect you often will notice this yourself when you're working with students and they're in your presence and you're trying to explain what you're doing, and then you recognize what you're doing. But if you're
Right.
just working on your own, you're like just doing it. You're not explaining it. You're
Right.
just doing it.
Well, that's one of the sort of the reasons I teach. They say, if you can teach something, then you have truly learned it and acquired it. So teaching is actually a learning exercise for me. And every time I teach a workshop, I'm learning from my students, and I've always discover something new, like a technique, or like let's say try to target this one nerve, for example, but students ended up targeting a different nerve, and then you think like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be able to get that nerve from this location, but obviously it's happening. So it's
Mm-hmm.
reinventing and figuring out new ways to access a different target that I haven't thought about before. So it's always exciting. We always discover some new stuff when we teach these workshops. But I want to talk about the language thing, because having since we're getting off metaphysical and philosophical and talking about Taoism, obviously the first two sentences from the Tao Te Ching is that the word that can be spoken is not the constant word, and the Tao that can be followed is not the constant Tao or constant path, right? So it's when you think about something, like, are you thinking in English? Are you thinking in a language, or your thought does not have a language or word to it?
That's a really good question. Um, I mean, at this point, when I'm working in clinic, sometimes I'm thinking in English, sometimes I'm thinking in Chinese,
Awesome.
sometimes I'm not thinking. I'm observing, I'm sensing, I'm experiencing. There are things that arise. Sometimes I can put it into language. Sometimes it goes into just a kind of a knowing.
Yeah. See, language is like a two-edged sword. Like, and I wonder if that's what it means by the 言可言非常言, is that the word that can be spoken is not a constant word. Because, if you are using a certain language in your thinking process, and I these days, I think more English than I do in Chinese, because I was only came to the West when I was 10 years old. So, um, language, English language will have vocabularies that Chinese language won't have, but the vice is true. So, like, for example, there's that we've all heard of stories like, apparently the Arctic Inuits have like 20 words for snow, and we just have one word for snow, right? But there's different types of snow, right? Because if you live in that environment, you have more observing, and you have different things.
Exactly.
So
I used to live in Seattle. We
yeah,
had a lot of different names for gray and different kinds of rain. We even had a
yes,
thing out there called sunbreaks.
yeah. Yeah, some breaks. That's funny. When like a peak of light comes through for just a minute, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, but like so the language could be. I can see how the language is not the constant, because you can be limited by thinking or expressing certain language, but there is more to reality if you're actually able to think a different language, or at least be aware and learn different language.
There is definitely more possibilities. There are other
Exactly.
possibilities. Some of it's the language in the words, some of it's the grammar in the way that you
Yes.
parse reality.
That's right. I mean, for example, Chinese doesn't really have tenses, so time is irrelevant to the Chinese people. Maybe that's why they say that the Asian thinking is cyclical time, right? There's not a linear time. Maybe that's because there's no past, present, and future. I mean, it's at least not with the conjugation of the verbs, anyways. So
That used to drive
yeah,
me crazy when I was first learning Chinese. It's like, wait a minute, how do you set things in time? Oh, there's this little la particle, right?
yeah,
It's like, oh, it's continuing or it ended, and it's totally contextual.
yeah,
Super
exactly.
annoying to a Westerner.
Yeah, so you can see how that has totally changed your perception of reality. Right? What's more intimate to reality, the sense of time, right? That if for somebody that they speak or think in a language that is not time sensitive, then
Well,
it's
it parses time in a different way.
yeah,
I mean, we are beings in time. There's no way around being in time because that's just how it works where we happen to be living. But how you approach and parse and experience time That can be different depending on the language.
Hmm. The
Well, there's another thing I want to ask you about this too, because this is something, this is like the tender edge of something I'm working with in clinic, because I can remember being in acupuncture school and hearing some people say, well, I just intuitively know what to do. And I think to myself, intuitively know what to do. What the hell are you talking about?
yeah.
I mean, do you actually know, like capital K know, or are you just being lazy, or are you just making shit up? And it used to drive me nuts because I tend to be a more rational, linear kind of guy. All right, 20 years of practice now. We're having this conversation about language. Sometimes I'm in Chinese, sometimes I'm in English. Sometimes I'm recognizing that I'm like in a mental model. Language creates mental models, and the mental models that we have determine the perception that we have.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so often with patients, I've got this idea or story of what's going on with them. That idea or story or theory or hypothesis, I like to call it these days, will determine to some degree what I can see and experience with them. But if I can set that slightly aside or make it a little softer and work with what I call direct sensing versus thinking, sometimes other stuff comes through, but it doesn't come through as language. It comes through as a feeling or a perception or a gestalt. Maybe I notice something on the face. Maybe I notice how this pulse connects with that symptom, connects with, oh, this makes me think about the tie-in aspect of them.
Hmm.
It's hard to say where some of this stuff comes through because we need these mental models to focus ourselves in clinic. At the same time, we need to be open to this other stuff. And it sounds like you've got this background from the beginning that allowed you to like open your perception very wide with the feng shui, with the
Yeah,
metaphysics.
a lot of people may not know that or are very surprised when they know that. I have this huge interest in the metaphysics because sort of my reputation is very anatomical, very neuroscience based, and it would seem totally removed from something that's so abstract and metaphysical as opposed to physical. And so I mean, it goes back to our discussion about like, when you have resistance against something or not. Like, again, going back to my mentor, the Taoist alchemist, he said to me, you know, you are so analytical and intellectual that it's actually handicapping you. And so you need to embrace and learn and expose yourself to things that are totally illogical. Okay.
Non-rational.
Non-rational. Yeah. And if the whole notion of health and balance is yin and yang, right? And then the opposites, then I was being way too yin and so reflective, internal reflective, and so deductive and reasoning based that I was missing this whole heart or emotional side. So for me, having that metaphysical, non-rational introduction to the medicine, I felt was actually what grounded me and what, in a way, makes me a bit more balanced in my approach to Chinese medicine because I could have totally just continued this doctoral research way of studying Chinese medicine and then ended up being just a scholar rather than a practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there's a lot more to medicine than just knowing, um, what this pulse means, right? Like, there's, the benevolence, the compassion, the connection with the patient, the therapeutic relationship. If anything, those are the things, those soft skills that we don't really learn in school that we only acquire from observing our mentors is probably more important than how good at you are making a pattern differentiation, for example.
This really, it does circle back to this thing that you were talking about earlier, that a doctor, and I think not just a Chinese doctor, but really any doctor, if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to help people with their health and their well-being. You need to be a bit of a polymath. You need to have that deep, rational, understanding, logical piece. You need to have that open heart, being able to connect with people piece. You need to be able to have that part that can look at a pattern and go, oh, this is that pattern. We do that. And then you also need the part that's able to like stand outside of patterns and be sensitive to what's arising that might be important, that doesn't fit like the neural network that you have of how you make sense of things.
Hmm.
All those things, I suspect, are required, which is why this work is not easy
But at the
and
same
why it's
time,
so satisfying.
very fulfilling. I was just gonna say it's very,
Mm.
very fulfilling. Like if you think, going back in time to where early primitive society, the doctor was the shaman, was the medicine man, was the spiritual consultant. So in the very beginnings, like a healer or practitioner was already somebody that was very connected with nature, with the divine, with the spirits, and was able to provide healing in an extra dimensional or in a supernatural kind of way that's metaphysical, right? And so I guess you could say that by not having that metaphysical aspect to your practice, you well actually say this way: if you had a metaphysical aspect to your practice, then it would be a little bit more closer to the early path of the healers in our early human history. And for some people, that might be comforting to know that it's okay if they have, just kind of a different side or a bit more esoteric side to their practice.
Well, it sounds like in the work that you've done, because you've got that deep metaphysical piece. It's actually what drew you in to the work. You also have this very hands-on, formed, looking at the body, looking in the body, like cutting the body apart to see how the body's put together aspect of understanding the medicine. And I don't think these are mutually exclusive. And that one is better than the other. Question is, how much can you inhabit all the things that are available to us to understand how to help people? I mean, it sounds like the depth of your metaphysical inquiry opened up the possibility for the depth of your very scientific look into the body, neurology, and acupuncture points. These do not seem like contradictions to me. They look like two sides of a coin.
Exactly. You know, a good scientist can realize that science is just a model, right? It's a framework. It's not the only way to perceive reality or objectify reality. And I think it's unfortunate that there are a lot of scientists or researchers that think that science is the only way to interpret the world. And if anything, that's very unscientific because you're very close-minded. You have a priori prejudice, okay, of what your outcome should be. And if unfortunately or fortunately, science is based on quantifying something, and if it's is a field or an area that's a qualitative area, science can really not measure that because you
It's
cannot.
not so good at it.
You're not so good at it.
Not so good
So
at it.
so I actually how did this tie into Chinese medicine? I often, again, I hate this language thing, but language does help us language is two-edged sword. The language gives us better clarity and intention, and for Chinese medicine practitioners that do not speak Chinese or do not read Chinese, it helps them to have some idea of what the pictograph of these medical words means, so that gives them a more image and that helps with the intention, right? But at the same time, one can be so limited if one too overly identifies with the character. And I want to talk about the idea of repletion of acuity versus deficiency and excess. The Chinese character for shi and shui, in my humble opinion, is more accurately translated as repletion of acuity versus excess of deficiency. For example, and just like in colloquial English, one never uses the word vacuous or replete. In Chinese, it's the same. You don't use the word shi and shui in your day-to-day conversation. They are words that connote too much or too little, okay, that are more commonly used. So repletion of acuity are very specific medical terms, or actually they are very specific metaphysical terms. And
metaphysical terms.
Okay. And so what's the difference? To me, the difference is that repletion of acuity is qualitative, whereas excess of deficiency is quantitative. And in the beginning of introduction of Chinese medicine terminology and teaching to the West, probably because to make it easier for students to learn, we can go into all the different ways that one should translate things or transliterate things. But students definitely kind of think in terms of excess deficient. And I think ultimately that is going to be a hindrance because you are thinking in terms of a quantitative notion, whereas when in fact repletion of acuity is a qualitative notion. And so, when you take a pulse and you say somebody who has qi acuity versus qi deficiency, it changes. You're not trying to increase qi back to 100%. You're trying to improve the quality of the qi. That's totally different. So for whatever that is worth, okay, tying back to the language and the metaphysics and the intention and the science being quantitative versus somebody who's able to think beyond the scientific way, who's more embracing of a qualitative worldview. I hope that is some food for thought for our listeners.
Thank you. I just take this in and think about my own practice and recognize there's a qualitative aspect that needs to be attended to. There's a quantitative aspect that needs to be attended to. There's something about the relationship between those that seems to be ever changing in the moment. I think one of the wonderful things about Chinese medicine is that we're invited to use all of this. It's not just qualitative, it's not just quantitative. We're invited to use both of these aspects of making sense of this world that we live in, as well as all those relationships between them, which again, it doesn't make it easy, but in some ways it makes it very satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Poney, anything else you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye for today?
I guess I want to just say that how much I appreciate and thank what Chinese medicine has done for my life personally. Obviously, it's given me the opportunity to meet people, meet you, travel the world, and teach is very gratifying. But just in terms of patient interactions and growing as an individual person, I've always been somebody that it's more of a internal, more of a somebody who's more brain than heart, so to speak, right? And I've come to realize that by being a clinician or being a Chinese medicine practitioner, it actually opened up my heart. That hearing, the difficulties that patients go through or their loved ones are going through, or the unfortunate things that are happening to the children, it actually, these are things that patients open up to you. They probably don't tell their coworkers these kind of things, right? But they share that with you, right?
Not.
And
they may not even tell their other doctors.
Yeah, exactly. So, and to be just so fortunate to be in that position where you can relate to the suffering, or at least try to connect with them through suffering. I feel like it has given me the opportunity to actually be more balanced in terms of brain and heart. That had I been a scholar or a researcher, I would be just so much brain. I'd just be like this big nerdy brain and without any heart. And so I go home at the end of the day, and I feel how lucky I am that I'm not going through the same things that some of my patients are going through. The way that health has impacted their family and impacted their loved ones and their children's that sort of thing. It's a privilege and honor to be able to share that with them. But at the same time, it adds to my own appreciation of my my own health, my own life. And you actually start to understand a lot more about how much like your parents love you, or how much you love your own children, because of the challenges in those loving relationships that people are having because of health. And yeah, I know I'm not really articulating this word, so I'm going to blame the Tao Te Ching, because the words that can be spoken cannot be constantly true. But I feel like I would not be anywhere close as a warm-blooded human being today if it wasn't because of Chinese medicine.
I think it's true that so often the things that are most real, we cannot completely fit into words. So there is that. And I appreciate your sentiment on this. I feel like the practice of medicine has given much to me that I would otherwise not have gotten in this life. I feel very privileged that I get to do this, and that, it also brings good into the world for other people. We're very fortunate to be able to do what we do.
Absolutely. Great.
Poney, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Michael.
Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological, or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.